You slip into the icy Arctic waters from your mother's body, already swimming. No time for a cozy welcome when the water's -2 degrees Celsius. Your first breath burns like knives in your lungs. Unlike those show-off dolphins doing backflips in warmer waters, you've got your first challenge. Don't freeze to death. Good thing you're born with a thick layer of blubber, nature's wetsuit. At this point, you look more like a gray floating sausage than the majestic creature you're supposed to become. Your mom sticks around, unlike some other marine mammals we won't mention, guiding you through your first few days. She's teaching you the basics, how to find breathing holes in the ice, when to surface, and most importantly, how not to become someone else's dinner. Speaking of dinner, those killer whales? They think baby narwhal is basically the caviar of the Arctic. And polar bears, well, let's just say they're not looking to make friends. Your first close call comes early. You're barely a month old when a shadow passes overhead, an orca pod. Mom rushes you deep, deeper than you've ever gone before. Your tiny lungs burn, but it's better than being torn apart. The pressure squeezes your body like you're stuck in nature's trash compactor, but that's the least of your worries. You can hear their clicks and calls above, hunting, searching. Minutes feel like hours until they finally move on. Welcome to the Arctic, kid. Growing up isn't exactly a beach vacation. You spend your days learning the family business, deep diving for Greenland halibut, Arctic cod, and if you're lucky, some juicy squid. Your secret weapon? That melon-shaped head of yours isn't just for looks. It's packed with echolocation equipment that would make military sonar jealous. Though honestly, your first attempts at using it are about as graceful as a drunk penguin. You send out clicks that bounce back telling you there's food ahead. But when you charge forward, it turns out to be just another chunk of ice. Hey, everyone's got to start somewhere. Speaking of learning curves, there's the whole pressure thing. You can dive deeper than almost any other marine mammal, nearly 2 miles down. Your body literally collapses and reinflates as you dive and surface, like some kind of living accordion. The first time you hit 6,000 feet, you thought your head would implode. Good news, it didn't. Bad news, every fish at that depth looked like it was laughing at your compressed, bug-eyed appearance. But you learn fast. You have to when dinner's at the bottom of the ocean. Around year 5, something weird starts happening. If you're a male, and in this case you are, a tooth decides it's too good for your mouth and starts growing right through your upper lip. Not just any tooth, this bad boy will eventually stretch up to 9 feet long. It's like puberty gave you the world's most inconvenient selfie stick. And get this, it's got millions of nerve endings. Imagine having the world's most sensitive antenna sticking out of your face. Every temperature change, every brush against ice, every awkward bump into another narwhal, you feel it all. Speaking of that tusk, here's something they don't tell you in Arctic school. During the winter darkness, when the sun doesn't show its face for months, your tusk becomes nature's weather station. Those millions of nerve endings, they pick up everything from water salinity to barometric pressure. You're basically a swimming meteorologist, minus the fancy graphics and questionable forecasts. Welcome to bachelor life, kid. You're hanging with the other young males now, practicing your tusking game like teenagers with their first lightsabers. It's all fun and games until someone gets a tusk to the blubber. You learn pretty quick that crossing tusks isn't just for show. It's how you figure out who's who in the narwhal world. Some hotshot shows up with 2 tusks. Yeah, that can happen, overachiever much, and suddenly everyone's trying to prove they're the next big thing in the Arctic. Social life in the pod is complicated. Social life in the deep isn't all about fighting and showing off. Your pod has developed a language more complex than those chatty dolphins down south. Different clicks for different clicks. You've got your hunting calls, your dating calls, and your hey, watch out for that ice sheet calls. Though occasionally signals get crossed, like that embarrassing time you used your mating call when you meant to warn about an approaching orca. Talk about sending mixed messages. Life gets real when you join the big migrations. Thousands of narwhals, all swimming together like some underwater flash mob. The bachelor pod life teaches you quick how to use your tusk to stun fish. Turns out it's basically a medieval mace. How to navigate the social hierarchy. Hint, size matters, but technique matters more. And most importantly, How not to be that guy who gets lost during migration because he was too busy showing off. You've mastered the pod's secret migration routes too, passed down through generations like some underwater treasure map. These aren't your average Sunday drive paths. We're talking about navigating underwater canyons, following ancient currents, and finding sweet spots where the cold, nutrient-rich water brings all the fish to the yard. It's like having a GPS hardwired into your brain, except occasionally it needs a good whack with your tusk to work properly. Winter brings its own special kind of fun. You gather in deep fjords with hundreds of others, creating what humans would probably call a narwhal convention. It's partly for protection, partly for socializing, and mostly because nobody wants to face the Arctic winter alone. Plus, all those bodies in one place help keep the water from freezing solid. It's like a giant underwater cuddle puddle, minus the actual cuddling, because, well, tusks. Speaking of showing off, let's talk about your first real fight. Another male, about your size, decides your patch of fishing ground is his fishing ground. What follows is basically underwater fencing meets sumo wrestling. You cross tusks, push, twist. It's all very dramatic until you both realize you're missing out on the fish you were fighting over in the first place. Turns out other narwhals were just peacefully eating while you two were playing medieval times. Years pass and you've gotten pretty good at this whole Arctic life thing. You've mastered the art of catching fish in complete darkness, echolocation for the win, survived more close calls with orcas than you care to count. We don't talk about that one time you almost swam right into a pod. Let's just say your sonar was having an off day, and even learned to use your tusk to stun prey. Not bad for someone who looks like a unicorn took a wrong turn and ended up in the ocean. But lately, things have been different. The ice patterns you've known your whole life are changing. Breathing holes aren't where they used to be. The water's warmer, and your traditional feeding grounds are shifting. That tusk of yours, with its millions of nerve endings, it's picking up changes that make your ancestors' migration routes about as useful as last year's GPS updates. You notice younger males adapting faster, finding new routes, new feeding grounds. Your old battle scars ache more these days, and those deep dives to 6,000 feet aren't getting any easier. Remember when you could hold your breath for 25 minutes? Now you're surfacing early, each dive taking more out of you than the last. The pod's getting smaller too. Climate change isn't just a fancy human word, it's writing obituaries in the Arctic. That old female who used to lead the migration? Gone. The rival you used to fight with every mating season? Haven't seen him in years. The gaps in the pod are like missing teeth in a smile. You notice them more with each passing season. One winter day, during what should be a routine dive for halibut, something feels off. Your muscles aren't responding quite like they should. The cold seems to bite deeper than before. As you search for the breathing hole you used to enter this area, panic sets in. The ice has shifted, a common occurrence, but usually you're strong enough to search for another opening. Not today. Your lungs burn like you've swallowed fire. You swim along the ice ceiling, searching desperately for any crack, any opening. Your echolocation bounces back nothing but solid ice. The pod's calls grow fainter. They're moving on, following the migration route hardwired into their brains. Your tusk, that trusty sensor, scrapes uselessly against the thick ice sheet above. Each brush against the frozen ceiling sends painful signals through those nerve endings, a final reminder of how alive you still are, even as death approaches. In your final moments, as the cold seeps deeper into your bones, memories flash through your mind like schools of startled fish. Your first successful dive, those awkward bachelor days, the fights won and lost, the calves you helped bring into this world. You think about the irony, all those years of avoiding predators, fighting rivals, surviving the harshest conditions on Earth, only to be defeated by the very ice that sheltered you all your life. Your body sinks into the cold, dark abyss, disappearing where your life began. That tusk, once a symbol of pride, will now lie forgotten on the seafloor, a relic of a species fading into the void. In a few centuries, maybe a human will stumble upon it, guessing at the life it once marked, but never knowing how much it suffered or how little time was left. The pod keeps moving, their calls growing fainter in warmer waters. A new calf enters the world, its first breath a fragile echo of your own. Life in the Arctic goes on, indifferent to the disappearance of one among many. The dance of the sea continues, but you won't be part of it any longer. The ocean's cruelty is silent, and in a world changing faster than any creature can adapt, being a unicorn of the sea isn't a myth, it's a tragedy.